coming up next.
So we started with the secret to recovery from addiction is, and you have a very clear answer for that.
Yeah, it's the family. It is the family. And I think it's when the family discovers their proper role in the recovery process and embraces that role. Because addiction does affect the entire family, but so often, um, I know I did not understand. I didn't understand my proper role. And I think there's more education out there now, so more people get it than ever before. But if you're someone who's not really experienced a family member with an addiction before, you've not experienced addiction yourself, you get blindsided by this.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You are here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction, your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. The big secret to recovery from addiction is, and Darryl and I are going to try and answer that for today, because there are some things that especially parents are, with the best intentions, still struggling with. So I'm Tanya with Faith Over Addiction podcast. And this is today, my guest is Darryl Rodgers, and he has a fabulous story to tell us and to answer that question. The big secret about recovery from addiction. So Darryl, tell us a little bit more about how you got here. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, hey, I want to be an addiction expert.
Right. I had no idea I would end up doing this. My older brother was a helicopter pilot, and I got really interested in flying early on and started out with an aviation career and have done a lot of different things over the years. But then my oldest son, Chase, when he was 20 years old, he died in a wreck. It was 2014. there was marijuana impairment involved in the wreck. He was a passenger, front seat passenger in his own car being driven. They had all smoked marijuana, but he had been struggling for about a year and a half prior to that with addiction, and he had
Mm.
been to treatment and back. And so, yeah, there are a lot of things that happened there. And it all seemed to happen so fast. I still did not have a good grasp on addiction, was still trying to understand addiction. So that sort of propelled me down this path.
Whew, Darryl, you got the call that no parent wants
Yeah.
ever, right? We all hope to pass before our children do. As you're wandering down this path that you never wanted,
Mm.
where are you seeing God? Where are you seeing, your faith? How are you walking this?
Yeah. So, you know, everybody's grief journey, I've learned, is unique to them, a little bit different, depending on the circumstances and all. And um, my wife and I certainly grieve differently, so the first year, really, I spent grieving, just writing a book. I wrote a book about the experience and about the loss of my son. And I mean, you can tell it was written by a grieving father. I was still angry at some of the things that happened, and didn't understand why it happened, and was really still searching for answers. But that was my way of kind of getting my feelings out. It really started out as a journal, and with no intention in the beginning to publish it, but then eventually I decided to publish it. But really, I would say, in terms of, I was saved when I was very young. I was 7 years old, and my father was a Southern Baptist preacher, so raised in the church. And I did realize I was a sinner and that I needed a savior. And so, like I said, came to know Jesus at an early age. But we go through different phases of growth in life, and even as Christians, we go through. We hopefully we grow spiritually, and God sometimes, if we get ourselves out of the way and allow Him to, He can use circumstances like this to help us grow spiritually. And certainly, I think, um, you know, I would say to I have learned to control my emotions a lot better. Uh, I've matured a lot spiritually. I'm still a work in progress,
Of
but
course.
I'm striving to grow. I'm striving more than I ever have. To grow, to learn more, to get stronger every day, so that I can hopefully help other people along whatever journey they're on. And for me, a lot of times that is parents who have a child battling addiction. It's a learning process, and that keeps me engaged. It keeps me excited about life, about the possibilities of being able to help other people, and just being curious and learning more.
So we started with the secret to recovery from addiction is, and you have a very clear answer for that.
Yeah, it's the family. It is the family. And I think it's when the family discovers their proper role in the recovery process and embraces that role, because addiction does affect the entire family. But so often, um, I know I didn't understand my proper role. And I think there's more education out there now, so more people get it than ever before. But if you're someone who's not really experienced a family member with an addiction before, you've not experienced addiction yourself, you get blindsided by this. And if you don't understand your proper role, I think what I see, some of the common mistakes that families make is they don't understand how to set and maintain healthy boundaries. A parent typically will they're afraid, they're scared that their child is going to die as a result of their addiction, and so they get over into enabling and rescuing behaviors, and it's just not a healthy place to be. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for their child, and certainly I did that, and that's why I
Give
can
us
speak
some
to it.
concrete examples. Like you said Chase had been to rehab. You knew this was an issue. This wasn't like the police just came to your house and said this happened. There had been some concern before. So give us some examples of where you might have stepped in and enabled, where you might have not had an awareness of what needed to happen.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of especially in the early stages, I did not know if he was using drugs or not. I just knew his behavior seemed off. It seemed different. And I'm one of those people that I need to know for certain. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I operate. That's my default, I guess. Like, before I begin taking some kind of corrective action, I want to know if the person I'm dealing with is, what is going on here. And so I was digging for answers. So I was snooping around, trying to get information on him and what he was doing, and those were some of the things that I was doing. I realized that even before the drug addiction, I was doing too much for him in some cases. In the middle of his sophomore year, his grades began to drop. He was failing a class for the first time, and he was changing the way he dressed a little bit, becoming rebellious, getting into a little bit of trouble, nothing real serious. But I was seeing all these warning signs coming at me all at once. And he transferred. I made this happen, for him to transfer to a military school. By the middle of his junior year, it took me about a year to put it all together and get him moved up there, and um, so he transferred to the military school, and he was already a life scout in the Boy Scouts of America, and
Mm.
he just needed a couple more things to make it to Eagle Scout, but he wasn't getting the job done. And I feel like I dragged him across the finish line to Eagle Scout, and he
Mm.
just I don't think he ever really appreciated that how big of a deal it was to become an Eagle Scout.
For those who don't know, it's a huge deal. It's an absolutely huge deal. So guys were kind of in this dream together.
Yeah, yeah. So, I kind of pushed him over the finish line, really. When I say I pushed him, he did the work. He did the work and he earned it. But if had I just not gotten involved at all and just left it up to him, he wouldn't have done it.
So
He
there were
wouldn't.
several signs. Grades were dropping, clothes were changing, things he had been previously highly interested in were
Yeah.
he was no longer interested in. Tell us about the friend groups. Were the friend groups shifting?
Yeah, I could tell he was hanging out with different kinds of people than he had before, a little bit, just starting to gradually drift that way. And then when he got to the military school, I guess everybody's experience is a little bit different. Maybe it depends on the school, depends on the leadership, at that particular time. But for him, you know, there were people there who were kids that were high achievers who were aiming to get into a service academy, but then there were kids who were coming from some troubled backgrounds as well. And he seemed to gravitate to those kids, and he got
Mm-hmm.
put in a room with a kid who was kind of headed down a bad path. Um, and nothing against that kid, I haven't talked to him in a while, but I mean, uh, we kind of patched things up a little bit because we had to, because he and I really butted heads because I felt like he was a bad influence on Chase, and he was rooming with Chase. And I eventually got the leadership to separate the two of them and got Chase a new roommate. But certainly Chase gravitated to people who were other people at that point in his life that were making not good choices, making some bad choices, and
What do you conceive of now that you've had a little space? And
yeah,
this is so hard. Now that you've had a little space, where was the pain for Chase? What was the call to do the behaviors that were, to use his name, were chasing away the pain? What was going
right,
on underneath? And where do you see that you could have stepped in differently than what you did?
yeah. That's a really good question. Thank you for that. That's something that I did not have a clear answer to for a really long time, and maybe I'm still not. I'm still guessing a little bit, but I think I've got it figured out finally. Chase struggled. He was diagnosed early on when he was in kindergarten or first grade, kindergarten with ADD, ADHD. His kindergarten teacher, he was in public schools. His kindergarten teacher was very insistent that we get him tested, and we pushed back against that initially. I'm not a big fan of medicating kids. I want to I like to look for other answers, other solutions first. And but we did eventually realize that he was going to struggle academically if we didn't do something. And I toyed around with the idea of homeschooling several times, but homeschooling was not where it is today at that time. And
Absolutely. I
uh,
agree. My son just turned 20 this year, and even 20 years ago,
yeah,
which would have been 10 years off of Chase's, right? It just wasn't, the communities weren't there. So I can
right,
hear
yeah,
your struggle loud and clear with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, and the internet was still not, well, it's not what it is today either. So I was back and forth about what to do about that. But anyway, we did end up putting him on a low dose of Concerta, which is a drug to help manage ADD, ADHD. And Chase, he could be hyper at times. His diagnosis was ADD. The psychiatrist, the day that he was there, did not see the hyperactivity side of it, but I saw it at home, and my wife
Sure.
saw it. It could be very impulsive at times, but it was mostly just lack of focus in the classroom. And honestly, I think he was bored. He needed
Mm,
to be. He was a smart kid, but he needed to be hands on. Learning a lot of things hands on and moving around, and the classroom environment just wasn't good for him. And um, my wife, it really was only about 6 months ago that she discovered a journal entry from when he was in military school where he wrote, and it was a writing assignment, but
mm.
he's writing, his about his feelings here, and he's like, I just feel like I don't fit in anywhere, and I think he really felt like he was socially awkward and didn't fit in, and that his grades, he felt like his grades were always average to above average, slightly above average, but he didn't feel like he was smart. He thought he was
Mhm.
not smart. He did not see his own gifts, and um, I wish I had recognized that a little bit more in him. He was. I could tell he was struggling with self-esteem, and I just wasn't equipped at the time to really help him with that. It's something I struggled with when I was a teenager. I think a lot of teenagers struggle
Sure.
with that.
It's it's
Uh,
that awkward cult time where we're not sure if this leg's working, that leg's working, what's working, and everybody else is in better shape than we are. I mean,
all right.
you can feel it as an adult too. So some
Yeah.
of that was seeing the gifts and validating him. And from my own
Hmm.
personal experience, often even if you validate, they can't receive. All right.
Yeah.
When we're talking about, even with Jesus, he would tell people, he would validate them, and then they would say, I don't get it,
Right.
and he can only offer what he's got to offer, right? So
Yeah.
I hear you. This is a struggle. So as you're looking back and walking through this, bring the family and your role back in, where you are able to help parents now. Where are you able to point parents?
Well, a lot of different things there, and just to touch on a little bit more on what we were just talking about, and kind of tie that over. When he was a teenager, I wish I had been a little less. I had the military background and everything, and I was just kind of rigid. And I wish I had been a little bit more. I wish I had created an environment where he felt more comfortable coming to me to talk to me about issues. He would go to my wife and talk to her.
Yeah.
And then she would tell me, Chase came to me and said this. And I'm like, why didn't he tell me? Well, because I was the disciplinarian.
Mm.
So, but let's see, I'm trying to think about what was the next part of your question here. Um,
When you're looking back, you've noticed some things now.
mhm.
The equipping that you wanted, what are you offering to parents now that you
Right,
have
right.
learned from this?
So once I discovered that he uh, was using drugs. And the deeper that we got into that, the more the fear began to kick in.
Mm,
And one of the things, I did not have good emotional management skills, good emotional control. And so, because of that, I was I don't know that I was enabling as much as I see a lot of parents do, and I see mothers struggle with enabling probably more so than the men, but certainly there's the chronic worry, and I see other
yes.
dads struggle with that, as well as the moms. Chronic worry, and when you have chronic worry and you're operating out of fear, we tend to not make the best decisions. Uh,
Never.
right. And then we become controlling. And there were some ways that I was trying to control him. And it's never a good thing to try to control another human being, no matter if it's your own child or not. You want to guide your child, you want to be a positive influence, but attempts to control result in uh, usually resentment from your child,
Mm.
and it creates you really drive a wedge there, and the communication just goes down the drain, and it just spirals. It's a downward spiral from there.
Did you become the bad guy? Were you to blame for everything at that point? If dad would
No,
just.
I don't. I do see that a lot, but I maybe to some extent, But things happen really quickly with Chase. It was really only about a year and a half from the time that he was addicted to the time that I knew he had a problem to the time that he
Right.
died. But I do see that a lot, and the moms. We tend to, just as human nature, we tend to take out our frustrations, especially verbally, more on the people that we know love us the most. It's just
Mm.
human nature, because we know they'll put up with it, they'll tolerate it.
Safety
And
factor. Yeah.
and moms are nurturing and loving, and so the moms catch it worse than anybody, from my experience, from working with families, especially from, well, maybe from the daughters too, but having raised two boys, I see it really with the boys really lash out at mom and blame mom for everything. And my heart goes out to the mothers out there who are going through that, because yeah, I see what they go through and I get it. I can't get it completely, but I get it from a parenting standpoint for sure.
What can moms who are in the heat of the battle do to one, take care of themselves, because I think that has to come first before you can set the healthy boundaries. You have to be aware
Yeah.
of what you need first. And let's not go to the extreme where there's stealing and physical violence, but say there's verbal communication that is less than respectful. What can moms start doing to say, I love you, and this is not acceptable?
Right. Right. Um, well, first they need to get educated. And so I would say, look for organizations out there where you can find peer support groups. Um, I, for almost 8 years, or maybe a little over 8 years, I facilitated a peer support group on a volunteer basis. And that's with an organization called PAL, Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, PAL, Parents of Addicted
Mhm.
Loved Ones. And they're based out of Phoenix, Arizona. They have local meetings around the United States, and they may have some overseas as well. I know they have some online meetings, and some of those online meetings are for overseas people. But so there are a number of different ways to connect with PAL. But aside from PAL, there's Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. There is which for families with a child or a loved one battling addiction, and then I'm part of a group of I collaborate with a group of interventionists. I'm a family recovery coach and interventionist, and I collaborate with this group of other interventionists. We're all independent, but we work together, and um, we have right now we have two meetings, one on Monday nights and one on Thursday nights from 8 until 9 p.m. And there's no selling in the meeting. I mean, at the end of the meeting, we'll say, hey, if you want to book a session with us, you can go to this link and book a session with one of us. But that's pretty much the extent of it. It is a support meeting. There's a lot of good information there. I'm kind of the oddball out of all of the interventionists because everyone else there is in long-term recovery, from drug or alcohol addiction, and they all have really interesting stories. I'm the dad, I'm the one parent, that has not experienced that side of things, but. So I'm a little bit different like that, but it's a good 1 hour family support group where these interventionists, there's two or three of them that have been at this for 13, 14 years in terms of doing interventions. And part of interventions is a big part of it. Most people don't realize. Most people think that an intervention means you're going to come in and talk my loved one into going to treatment. And that's not exactly how it works. It's more really about working with the family in advance leading up to the intervention and the day of the intervention a lot and after the intervention to some
Yes.
extent, working with the family on helping the family learn how to communicate better with their loved one, learn how to set those boundaries, learn how to control those emotions like I was talking about earlier.
So talk a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first called it interventionalists, I had no idea what they really did.
Right.
A lot of the value came from learning more about what an intervention really was, because it's
Mhm.
it's just it's just like when we see the show Survivor. They do the clips they want us to see. When we see an interventionist show, we see the clips they want us to see. We don't see all
Mhm.
that prep work. Talk through what you are really helping the family do that has not a whole lot to do with that person, because the family needs to skill up.
Right. So in the very beginning, you're first it depends on who calls you, but you're trying to help them assemble a team of people, and figure out who's going to be the first person you're going to put on that team, who's going to be your wingman, and then And then, because almost always not everyone is on the same page on the and within the family unit and friends, close friends, they're not on the same page with what is the solution, what is the real problem here and what is the solution. And so we try to get everybody together for a meeting. We try to get that team, help that one person assemble that team, get everybody together for a meeting and educate everyone on what is addiction and what's going on here and what is the solution, and get everyone pulling together on the same page with the solution. And then typically we will help them pick out some usually at least two different treatment options that as an interventionist, we feel like, okay, this would be a fit. Having heard your story and having learned a little bit about your loved one and their situation, this would be a good fit for them for treatment. And so we offer a couple of different options, let them choose, let them make the calls to the treatment programs and get the information, check with their insurance, all of that, and decide, where they want to send them. And it's always good to have at least two options in case one place, for whatever reason, doesn't work out. And then it's just a matter of trying to get all of the logistics worked out to get everyone together at the same time. We help everyone craft letters, and the letters are very important because on the day of the intervention, you want people to read those letters, and the interventionist will edit the letters so that we make sure that there are things that do not get put in the letters that might cause a big confrontation. We want to communicate in a specific way that it starts with compassion and love, and these are the things that we love about you. We love you unconditionally, but these are the special qualities we see about you, and then this is how your behavior has affected me
Mm.
recently, and talk about some of those negative things, and then basically wrap it up with we see you struggling, and so we want to offer you this option to go to treatment today. And wrapped up in that letter is going to be some new boundaries. These are the things we will not do. We will no longer enable you in the following ways. And we love you, and because we love you, we're going to change the way we behave around you because we want to help you, not harm you.
Now we've
Um,
come full circle to those healthy boundaries, and I've just heard it said
yeah,
on a program I was listening to that boundaries without consequences are just a bad suggestion. And
yeah,
and I
yeah.
call them veiled threats because oftentimes we are very angry when we say these things, and so they come
Uh-huh.
out in a very threatening manner. So as you're the intervention is a pretty high level, um, a high level technique that we
Mm,
use to help somebody, as you said, out of love, out of concern, out of, hey, I'm your family member and I see this and I love you and I don't want this to continue.
mm.
When you are teaching healthy boundaries in this intervention process, how are you doing that, especially when you've probably got some folks who are not really clear on what a boundary really is?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, there has to be some education around the boundaries, and really a boundary is really not really supposed to be used to control people on the outside. It's to protect the people on the inside from being on an emotional roller coaster. So it's to protect the people on the inside from emotional and physical harm. Um, However, the boundaries, when they're put in place, communicated effectively and lovingly, and when those boundaries are put in place, it can help create a willingness in the individual that's struggling with addiction to get the help that they need. Because up until this point, they've been able to to cross those boundaries. They've been able to ignore any boundaries, or maybe there weren't any boundaries there, or not much, and they've been able to get what they want. And now, when you bring in an interventionist, it's you've got a higher level of seriousness there. They know you're serious because you have a professional there, and the way it's being communicated is different. A lot of times I'll hear families say something along the lines of, I just can't do this anymore. And they've heard that 100 times, and so it just goes in one ear and out the other. So you change the language, and a lot of times it's just really subtle, like, I will not do this anymore. I will not, you can no longer live in my house if you're going to behave this way. Here's another option. And I'm not saying that, not in every case do you do. Some people look at it as an ultimatum. I don't. I look at it as you're offering them an opportunity to get help and you're giving them a choice, and they can choose to go to treatment or they can choose to move out. But I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do in every situation. But that's just one example. Often it
And
is the right thing to do. But
that's a pretty high level example.
yeah,
There are
yeah.
steps in between. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
one of the
yeah,
things that you're really talking about is getting clarity. I mean, you've talked about it throughout the podcast of, I
yeah.
wasn't sure about this. I wasn't sure if that was really happening. And sometimes we don't have to know exact details.
That's
We're
right.
intuitive enough that we know something. You said something was off, something
That's
needed
right.
to change, there was some pain in there. And that's where, correct me if I'm wrong, starting with a coach, a recovery coach, you said this early on and a couple times, get in
Yeah.
there and learn. So you also have a course. Tell us a little bit more about the course that you have and what you've learned through. I learned so much when I create a course for something.
Right.
What you learn through that and what that can offer to folks who are curious and they're not ready to physically walk into a meeting. Like you said, there's
Right.
so much
Right.
stuff on the internet now, right?
Hmm. Hmm. I do have a course. It's called Ignite the Hope, and there's a lot of information packed into that course, and it's really designed to take families step by step through you can do it. You can go through the course fairly quickly, but if you schedule it out. I mean, it could be a 1 year process. I've developed a 1 year one-on-one coaching process around that course. And it starts out with just learning some of the basics about addiction, what addiction is, and how the brain, why is your loved one behaving the way that they are behaving? For example, why is my 25-year-old behaving more like a 15-year-old, and well,
Mhm.
what has happened to their brain that is causing them to behave this way? Because a lot of times I think as parents, when we don't understand why our children are behaving the way they are, we tend to come down a little bit harder on them, or maybe we're a little harsh. Whereas we understand now, okay, something's not quite right with their brain, and we need to come up with instead of just being really harsh and judgmental. Not that we shouldn't have, like, we do need to have firm boundaries, but we need to be more solution oriented, not just you're a bad person because you're behaving this way. What are the solutions here? Why are you behaving this way? And what are the solutions? So then I'll take them through. There's really 6 steps. I call it the family recovery roadmap that I use. Um, and it really starts out um, with recognizing, like I said, looking at those symptoms, with building your own vision for your own
Mhm.
future. Because look, I'm going to write a book about this. I haven't even started yet. I've been working on the title a little bit, but I am going to write it. Okay. I used
Do
to
you
fly
need an
heli.
accountability coach? Because that's what I do as my side job, right?
Yeah.
To where I'm like, okay, you said you were going to do that. What does that exactly look like?
Right. I probably do because I have two ideas, but I usually do eventually do these things that I say I'm going to do. But but because I've got three books out there, uh, I used to be a helicopter pilot, and so
Right.
I talk about, it's called, I think what I'm going to call it is Confessions of a Recovering Helicopter Dad. How to stop,
For those
how
that
to,
don't know, sometime between your kid and my kid, we came out with like the helicopter parent who hovers all the time, or the lackadaisical parent, or those types of things.
right.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
referring to?
Yeah, yeah. So and then I think the subtitle was something like "How to Stop Hovering Over Your Addicted Child and Chart Your Own Course for Peace," and I don't remember something like that. But anyway,
So,
that's the
so for
subtitle I'm
the
working.
mom that sounds selfish, right? She's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I don't need peace. I need my kid to get well. What
that's
can
right.
you
Yeah.
tell them about their peace helping their kid get well?
That's right. There you go. There you go. Thanks for tying that together for me. Yeah, that's the whole key. That's the thing that parents are missing. They want you to save their child, and they're like, "Tell me how to save my child's life." Well, the best way you can do that is to start working on your own life, because you don't have any control over your child and over their choices, over their decisions, especially when
And
we're
when you
talking
every
about,
time you've said that twice, and I just want to go la
yeah.
la 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 la. I want to pretend that I have
Yeah.
control over my child, when
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
what I have control over is, you've been talking about it the whole time,
Mm,
compassion, my
yeah.
responses, how I
That's
hold
right.
space for them,
Yeah.
whether I come at them. We've all had that experience of, when did my mother show up, or when did my dad show up in the
Uh,
conversation that I'm having with my child? Because what do? We
mm,
return to what was modeled to us, which may
right.
not have been instructive in this higher level situation we're in. And that's where you come in, right? That's where you come in,
Yeah.
Darryl.
Yeah, and it's really about learning to control and manage those emotions so that you don't allow the fear to cause you to get over into unhealthy attempts to control. Um, I want to give you an example here. This is a real world example that I can give you from my own life that I learned. Number one, both of my boys were completely different in terms of their personalities.
Mm,
There's definitely some similarities there, but there's some stark contrast as well. And I think that's typical of so many siblings. Um, and so I realized that I needed to change the way I parented my youngest son.
mm,
Because he was a different kid. And but then also when he was in the eighth grade is when Chase died,
mm,
and
mm.
to start with, when you have teenage boys in a house with a dad, with a military background and all this, I mean, there's a lot of, testosterone there, a lot of butting heads and stuff
Oh my
going
goodness,
on.
yeah.
And both of my boys are football players, both Eagle Scouts. So yeah, a lot of different opinions. And our youngest one, Chase, I could sort of lean on him a little bit, and he would go in the direction that he thought Dad wanted him to go. Well, I didn't realize until later. I thought, well, everything's okay with that. I realized later that a lot of times he just did things to make me happy. He wasn't necessarily always so happy with the direction Dad wanted him to go. He wanted to do his own thing. But our youngest son, Justin, he would push back, and he's like, "No, I don't want to do that, and I'm not doing it." And and we really were having a hard time, especially after Chase died. His I want to say around his freshman and sophomore year of high school. And then at some point, I realized this is not working and I'm just making things worse. And I started backing off of him and allowing him to make some mistakes.
Mm,
And as a parent, you want to allow them to make mistakes, but then I mean, you have to kind of use some discernment as to where to step in. Where do you step in and say, okay, that mistake is going to get you killed. Let's let's not make that one you know.
Well, well, and then to look at you with grace is you've lost one child.
Right,
The instinct would be to grab this other one, wrap him in bubble wrap, and say, "No, you're
right.
not doing any of this." To give
Yeah,
you extreme, that's a whole nother book, Darryl, of how to raise your other children after
that's true.
you've
That's a
had
really
something
good point.
tragic
Yeah.
happen. Because I can, as a mom, I can see that I would really want to clutch. And what is that child going to do? Especially, I have two boys too.
Mm.
They're going to push away the minute you start
Oh yeah, that's
clutching
right.
like that.
The harder you try to control that situation, and the more you work on trying to get them to go in the right direction, the more they push back, and it becomes an adversarial relationship, you know. And so, I'm just like, okay, whatever. You're going to make some mistakes, and I'm going to let you. And I let him. And I'll never forget when he was in his second semester of college. He calls me one day and he said, "Dad, you know, I got some questions. I've got this situation with this girl, and it was not any kind of serious situation or anything. It was just it was a, it was just a dating thing, you know." And he had this question, and it wasn't anything big, but I was just like floored that he thought to pick up the phone and call me to ask me my opinion
That he
about the
trusted you
situation.
enough with that vulnerable situation. Yeah.
It's because I had backed off and stopped trying to control everything. And ever since then, um, I get emotional. Uh,
I would too, man. Praise God. I mean,
but
that's a,
yeah, we
tell
have,
your wife, hey, he's calling me.
yeah, and we have a great relationship now. Yeah, he's a graduate student, and he's in a PhD program for chemistry.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
he's a
Wow.
really smart kid, and we during the summer between his when he graduated from college, he came home and just like, I'm just taking the summer off because I'm going to be in this PhD program, and don't bother me. I'm taking the summer off. You know, this is what I want to do. And we went to an air show, and I've never like tried to push him towards flying. And if in fact, if anything, I was after Chase died, I was like, you know, if like even when he played college football, I'm like, you sure? And even before that, I'm like, you sure you want to do this? You sure I'm not pushing you to do this? Are you sure I'm not talking? No, Dad, this is what I want to do. I was that emphatic about it. I did not want him I did not want to push him like I did Chase, you know.
Mhm.
And I wanted to make sure he was making his own choices there. But anyway, he has just done so well with all of that. And we went to some air shows, and he developed this interest in aviation, and he started flying Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is amazing now how far it's come. And he was in his room. He built his own computer, and he's like flying Microsoft Flight Simulator, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, I don't know how to, talk on the radios. I don't have all the aviation radio lingo because they're actually flying live and they have people who play the role of the controller.
Huh.
So I'm in there. I'm working the radios for him, talking on the radios as he's flying a regular flight, just like you would in the clouds and everything from point A to point B. And anyway, it was just a bonding experience for us over that summer. And so like I said, we get along really, really well. And I just leave him alone. I let him do his own thing. And, he texts me or calls me 2 or 3 times a week, probably,
And this is, what would you say about your emotional growth, your emotional awareness that's let you be this person?
I have just learned that um, when you have pain in your life, and you're going to have pain, that what I had to the most intense pain I've ever felt was when Chase died.
Of course.
And and I didn't know what to do with that in the beginning, and it was eating me up on the inside. I had a lot of anger, and I'm like, well, I can't just. I have to do something with this, and so what I decided to do was to try to take some kind of positive action.
Mm.
Allow that emotion to fuel me into taking some sort of positive action. And of course, I'm a Christian, and there's a lot of different directions you can go with that, right?
Sure.
So of course I'm praying, and of course I'm reading my Bible, and I'm looking for answers, and I'm asking God for help. But um, I just felt compelled to, for me, it was in the beginning, it was writing a book. I made a short film about Chase's life, and I'm out there like speaking, and I'm like, how can I make a positive impact on some kids' lives so they don't go down this same path? But the more I learned, the more I figured out that the families have a big role in this, and it was all about turning it back in on me. Like, how can I take this pain to really change myself, because I don't have any control over anyone else. And when you do that, it's amazing the kind of growth that you can have. And that's what I would say to parents is like, don't wait until let's pray that your child, if you have a child that's using drugs or battling addiction, that they don't that let's pray that they recover. But don't wait. Don't wait, and don't try to control them or blame them or fix them. Work on yourself. Use that pain and to reflect back inward on yourself, and how can I grow spiritually? How can I use this pain to motivate me to grow spiritually? And the really neat thing about that is when you do that, you put your child in the best position to be able to recover.
Absolutely. Amen. You are speaking truth. It's that drop of the pebble and then the ripples go out. And I'll speak directly to moms. I had this experience. My 20-year-old is living with me right now. He probably would not have been had I not gone to really deep therapy when he was 13, 14 years old. He didn't go to therapy. I want people to hear that loud and clear. I went to therapy. I changed the framework of the household. And we're at a point where I can trust him. He can trust me. We still have our rubs occasionally, and he'll be back out in his own apartment. But I had to do what you did, let him learn some life lessons. The roommate fell out, the apartment fell out, the job fell out, but now he's back to working. He's going to be back on his feet. But I had to back off and go, I'm not calling the boss. I'm not calling the landlord. I'm not going over to
Right.
clean up stuff. In fact, I made a promise to myself. I said, I know how he keeps his house. I am not going to enter his house. I'm going to take him to dinner. I'm going to invite him over to our house. I'm going to have him do that. But there are some healthy boundaries that keep you from making yourself crazy. And this podcast is awesome, Darryl. You have basically walked through the whole cycle in the podcast and back around to how all your emotional growth has allowed you to connect with this beautiful youngest boy and how you're
you
sharing that
know
with the world.
what you just mentioned something right there that's really important too. Like when you get that phone call, hey mom, you know, I just lost my job, and my rent is coming due. How do you communicate those boundaries, and how do you communicate that in a loving way? And here's what I say. It should go something like this. Well, John, or whatever his name is, you're a very smart and very resourceful young man, and I know you'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Now, mine would play me a little deeper. And unfortunately, we have a family member who's in the extended family who has offered dollars when we have all said, this is
No.
not a good idea.
Uh,
And I have made the promise to myself, I will feed him and I will have a bed for him. Now, we
mm,
haven't made it
mm.
completely comfortable. He sleeps in my office. So It's not like he
Uh,
suddenly gets a room back, all those types of things. But
uh,
beyond that, that is what I said. I said, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You can either find another roommate. There's plenty of work out there. You're a smart, talented guy, those types of things. And that
yeah,
is
yeah,
because of my healing, not because he is healed. He's still
that's
got some
right.
work
Yeah,
to do. So
yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm really hearing from you, is that as parents, we have so much opportunity, but it is not really what we think it is, or trying to step in and do or control their lives. It's how do I keep saying to him, boy, I know that you're going to get out there and submit an application, or you're going to call a friend, or you're going to do this, and step out there and really hold him up and say, hey,
Hmm.
you were a championship football player. You graduated with a 3.6. You know what to do. You've had other jobs. You know how to make this work. If you really want it, I've seen you go after it, son. Make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going from the way Parents of Addicted Loved Ones, they have a lesson on this, and it's really called going from caretaking to cheerleading.
Mm-hmm.
You're building them up, you're telling them, you're still supporting them, you're being supportive, but you're being supportive in a different way now. You're supporting them moral, you're giving them moral support and encouragement that they can do it on their own. It's because when you do things for another adult, even if it's your adult child, when you do things for them that they could be and should be doing for themselves, you're really hurting their self-esteem, because somewhere deep inside, they know they could have done that for themselves. They know they should be doing it for themselves, but then
Amen.
they begin to think, maybe I'm not capable of doing that for myself.
And that certainly is an unintended consequence, because
Hmm.
that is not the message I was ever trying to communicate. But just like when they're little and they're trying to help you wash dishes or sweep or put the laundry away or those types of things, sometimes with the rush of time, we say, oh, it's just easier for me to do it, to take care of it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that is a piece of enabling. Darryl, tell us where we can find you and your program, and how folks can connect with you.
If you go to thefamilyrecoverycoach.com, thefamilyrecoverycoach.com, there's a lot of info there. And, I'm all over social media. TikTok, believe it or not, is my number one social media
Good for you.
platform.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm also on Facebook and YouTube and just about every social media platform that you can think of. So yeah, can reach out that way. And I do have maybe I'll send you the link for this, but
Please.
I do have a free download for people to be able to get a communications sheet. I think it's called the go-to communication, or communications go-to sheet, something like that. But it really gives different scenarios that are common that come up with communications with a child who's battling addiction, and it gives parents examples of how you respond to those types of communications that might come up from your child, to help you kind of work through those situations.
Awesome. Well, I hope the listeners take advantage of that. Darryl, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here and your vulnerability. It's such a blessing, Darryl. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tanya. Great interview. Thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, Let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.